Hello friends! There are so many incredible brushes that come pre-installed with Procreate, and we're going to explore some of them. Today, I'm going to test out the marker brush. Okay, to find this brush, you're going to open the Procreate brush library, go to the inking section, and then scroll down till you find marker. Now I just want to mention that I have not made any changes to this brush in the Procreate Brush Studio. We're going to be using the brush in its original state, exactly how it was installed. Okay, so first let's take a look at the brush behaviors. This brush has a really great range of sizes. At a small size, you can get really fine lines. And here's what it looks like at a medium size and a large size. Now when you zoom in, you'll see that the smallest size looks fairly crisp, but then as the brush gets larger, you'll see a little bit of texture on the edges. And then here it really is visible on the largest size. The edges get really soft and kind of feathery. Now, if I were to draw a swatch of color, and note that I'm keeping my pencil down on the screen this whole time, the color looks pretty solid. Now, if I pick my pencil up and then put down another swatch of color, you'll notice that the brush actually is not opaque, it's translucent. So every time you pick the pencil up and draw another layer of color, that color will just get darker and darker and darker with each layer. Now that translucent quality can be pretty fun to play with. So if you, for example, layer different colors, you can almost kind of mix colors to create new colors. So that could potentially be a fun effect. Now I made all of those marks with the tip of the Apple Pencil. So let's explore what happens if I draw with the edge of the pencil. So I'm holding my pencil at a really low angle, almost horizontal to the iPad. And if I just make some really loose marks here, you'll see that it creates a completely different effect. It can still be layered and create a slightly darker color, but it gives you this really nice, light, translucent look that might be good for shading. We'll see. So I drew this quick sketch of some blueberries, and by the way, I drew this with the 6B pencil, which also comes pre-installed with Procreate. And I'm going to use the marker brush to ink this illustration, play around with it, and see what's possible. So as we saw with the scribble test, keeping your pencil down with this brush gives a nice solid color. So that's how I'm inking this first blueberry. I've just got my pencil down the entire time, and I've outlined and filled the shape with my pencil down. Ordinarily, I would just overlap that shape to draw the next blueberry, but as you can see, that overlap will create a darker color once it hits the first shape. So I'm going to use that same technique of keeping my pencil down the entire time to ink the rest of the blueberries. Now the good thing about the way this brush works is I could keep using this same kind of light blue color and ink these details directly on this layer, and it'll give me a darker blue. So that's actually kind of cool. So I'm going to stick with this same color and use that feature to start building up some shading and dimension. So first I'm just going to go around and just add a little bit more of that blue towards the bottom areas of the blueberries just to create a little bit of shadow. And actually, let's try layering another color in. So I'm going to pick this kind of lavender color and layer that on top of the light blue just to see what that looks like. And that's kind of fun. So I'm going to explore a little bit more and add a couple pops of bright pink on top of that blue. And this actually creates this really cool kind of purple color. And now I'm switching back to the light blue, and I'm going to kind of build up those layers of blue to get an even deeper color around the edges where I want a little bit of shadow. So the translucent quality of this brush, where you can layer the same color to create kind of a different color, is actually pretty cool and looks great if you're creating a kind of loose, expressive style like this. But you do have to be mindful of where you start with your color. So for example, I want to ink the leaves in kind of a medium green, but because the color will just keep getting darker as I go along, I'm actually going to start out with a much lighter green. Now, one thing about this layering effect, ordinarily I would outline my leaves and then fill with color. But as you can see here, it starts to get to be a little bit messy and all over the place. So I think what I'll do is go back to creating the shape with my pencil down so I get a more solid color fill. And then once I, start out with that solid color, I can build on that. And I have a little bit of an overlap here, but I don't think that'll be an issue. Now, another thing I would normally do is add a darker shade of green towards the base of the leaves to create some shading. But as you can see here, that transition from light to dark isn't very smooth. So I'm going to try using the smudge tool in the marker brush to smooth that out a bit. Okay, well, this is interesting. I'm kind of thinking of how I would use the smudge tool with other brushes, and it is not quite working with this brush. So let's see. I'm going to come up with a different approach here. I think what I'll do is build a couple layers of the green so that I have kind of a really rough gradient of color from light to dark. And I'm going to just kind of play around with how I use the smudge tool. Let's see if I use circular motions, if that's not quite working. So let me go back to kind of these short strokes. Yeah, I think that works a little bit better. It's not as smooth of a gradient as I would typically do, but this is a completely different look and feel. So I think that method works a little bit better. So I'm going to try that again with the other leaves. Okay, nope, circular doesn't work. So let me go back to these kind of light strokes. Now, one handy thing about the way this brush works is when I'm adding details to the leaves, like those veins in the leaves, I don't have to pick another color. I'm still using that super light green, but because I'm layering it over all of the other layers of green, it's showing up pretty dark on these leaves. So that's actually quite handy. Okay, let's think about highlights. I'm going to choose white and it does nothing. So clearly white or light colors won't blend in on the same layer. So I'm going to create a new layer, and actually this time I'm going to choose an even lighter blue, and let's see what happens. Okay, so this is interesting. Even though it's a translucent brush, on a new layer, it looks completely opaque. Now on the plus side, having that opaque look on a new layer means that I can add, more severe highlights and even use the smaller size of the brush to add a few details. I do want to figure out this highlight thing though. So I'm going to choose the lavender color that I had layered on before. And I'm going to use that technique of angling my pencil really low and adding those really light feathery strokes. And I think that actually works kind of well for a version of highlights. I'm going to try doing the same with the leaves. So I created a new layer above the leaf layer, and I'm going to choose this kind of chartreuse color just to add another layer of color here, and just using that same technique with my pencil angled really low. And again, this is on a separate layer. So what are my final thoughts on the marker brush? I like it. I think it's a versatile brush. It gives you a lot of room to play with color and to get really experimental. I do think it's best for a really expressive style where, you don't mind things being a little more loose. It could be frustrating if you want your colors to be very specific or you want to be very specific about placement. This might not be the brush for that type of work. So when you're using this brush, you're going to need to be flexible and open to whatever happens on the page. I hope you found this helpful, and if this is one of your favorite brushes, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and share your experience. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love if you'd give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.